Good afternoon and welcome to Engage for Success radio show number 626, Why Happiness is a Serious Business and Why Leaders Should Treat it as such. Today we're going to be talking about why happiness isn't soft, it's the engine of success. I'm Jo Dodds, your host for today. I'm an engagement consultant working within the Engage for Success team. The Engage for Success movement is an inclusive movement committed to the idea that there is a better way to work by releasing more of the capability and potential of people at work. We spread the word about employee engagement and shine a light on good practice, inspiring people and workplaces to thrive. And we're widely supported across the UK, involving the public, private and third sectors. If you go to our website, engageforsuccess.org, you can use the link at the bottom of the page to join our newsletter list, and all our social media links are there too. My guest today is Nick Marks, who's a statistician and an author, and I think a third-time attendee to the radio show. Welcome, Nick. Thanks for joining me today.
Thanks for having me back on again.
Lovely. And yeah, since we last spoke, you have written a book, and I was just telling you that I've actually read it as well. Always a result.
Well, hopefully it was engaging.
It was. It was very much so. So yeah, start by telling us a bit about who you are and what you do, and a bit about the book.
Yeah, I'm a statistician by trade. So I've been creating measures of quality of life, well-being and happiness for 30 years. I think 94 was my first publication. And I did a lot of work in public policy about why government should take well-being seriously in the 2000s. And then I've been working on work ever since. And the book is really about my, my statistical opinion, viewpoints on happiness at work, happiness engagement, well-being at work, and why it's a serious business. So it was quite difficult for a statistician like me to write a book, but it is out there now.
And tell us a bit about the process for it, because I feel like it was just, well, not surprisingly, you're a statistician. It was full of research and statistics and really sort of objective information. I mean, the sort of book that that's called Happiness is a Serious Business. Happiness, you immediately sort of would imagine it was going to be a bit
fluffy.
Yeah, fluffy. La la, isn't it lovely? Happiness, let's be happy, sort of thing. But actually it was, and it wasn't heavy going, I hasten to add, for anyone listening, because it was divided up into quite short chapters, and I felt it was very sort of precise and succinct within those chapters, but it is absolutely full of research and data and information that you can use to sort of sell this stuff within your organizations to the people who need to know about it. So tell me more about that process.
Well, yeah, I'm a statistician, so I'm always looking for evidence, and people you also ask me, what book would you recommend on happiness at work? And of course I could recommend some, but I thought really the book that I would like to recommend isn't there. So I thought I better write it. I think that's a good motivation to write, is if you feel you've got something to add to the pot, really. And so I started writing, and I wrote short chapters really because that's the way I think. I think about one idea, what's the data behind that? And of course I made a link between the chapters, but actually that was when my writing broke through. I do mean quite literally it's difficult for me. I'm probably undiagnosed dyslexic from 40, 50 years ago. But that means I don't use short words. I like data. I like to make a point. So there's 1 point per chapter. And I explore such things as like, how happiness is dynamic, how it isn't fluffy, how it's valuable, measurable, and you can operationalize it in your business, because when people feel good, they do good work.
And so most organizations would sort of hear the word happiness and think that it was about cakes on a Friday afternoon and people smiling a lot, or being very flippant here, but tell us more about why it's so important for organizations to look at this, and I guess why you would choose the word happiness rather than something that maybe businesses might have recognized in a different way.
Yeah. So, cakes are okay for short-term happiness. Smiling is actually really good because it's contagious, but of course it has to be authentic. And, in the research, we sometimes talk about, this is going back years now, but they called it the Pan Am smile, the fake smile. And that's actually sometimes called emotional labor. So often in hospitality, people have to smile a lot. And if it's forced, that's really, really draining. So what you're really looking for is a natural type of happiness at work. And we're not talking about happiness at home or happiness on the dance floor or happiness in wherever. We're talking about work. We're there for work. So there's an exchange to be made. And it is serious. I use the word happiness deliberately because I think the words, I mean, to slightly, not to push against engagement, because I totally get what it's for, but it does feel very corporate. And actually well-being has become more and more that. So I wanted to use a word that still felt fresh, that actually captures the emotional tone of what I'm talking about. And it is about enjoying your work, but in that sort of deep way. It's about being engaged in the sense of flow and being absorbed in your work. And the great thing about happiness really is that all of the positivity you get from engagement at work, you get from happiness at work too. In fact, probably a tiny bit more, because there's a bit more emotion in it. And people also understand, if I ask you how engaged were you at work last week, people would slightly struggle to answer that question.
Yes.
Whereas if you ask them how happy they were, we all know, because it's actually very natural to us to think in terms of our happiness.
Yes, I was about to say the same when you mentioned engaged, or you said, as you said, well-being. They're all words that are sort of used a lot, but the average employee would probably not use those words. And as you say, often asked about them, probably wouldn't entirely know what that's supposed to mean. But as you say, happiness, we all understand, don't we?
Yeah, I mean, happiness is basically, from an evolutionary biological perspective, a good bad signal. That, when we're a good fit for our environment, when our inner and outer worlds are aligned, we feel happy. And when they're not, we don't. So, it's a sort of good bad signal. And so actually what's interesting about that is it recognizes that unhappiness is functional. Unhappiness is a signal to change. Happiness is a signal to carry on, create and seize opportunities. Unhappiness is you've got to change something. And so in that way, it's a really useful indicator in an organization, because you immediately know how well teams are doing if you know how happy they are.
Yes, yeah. So you've spent years measuring happiness at work, and as we've sort of said, what does the data actually show us about that link between happiness, performance, and engagement? Because that's fundamentally what managers and senior managers want to know when we're saying happiness is important. Well, why? Tell us what that does for the business.
Yeah, so a happy team, happy individual is 20-30% more productive. It absolutely varies across sectors about types of roles. The more complex roles get, the more relational they get, the more creative they get, the more customer facing they get, the more that happiness matters. If you on your own doing technical, it's still care. The care of how you do it will matter, but it's going to be, the emotion is going to be more impactful if it's experienced with others. So that's one thing. We know that happier people stay longer. It's related to staff turnover. I mean, that's obvious. Unhappiness is a signal to change. If you're unhappy, you're going to change jobs, or more likely to. So we know that unhappy teams have got about 3 times the level of staff turnover as happy teams.
Wow.
So these are big effects, also related to burnout, that people who are happy at work are less likely to get burnt out. So there's lots and lots of ways. Creativity, we know that, and creativity and quite a lot of productivity is very day to day. You can have productive days and unproductive days, and happiness, your mood is likely to be driving that. And creativity is even more wonderful than that. Actually, when you feel good on day 1, you're more likely to be creative on day 2. And in a way, our brain, we have a good night's sleep, we start thinking about the problem, we might solve it the next day. And I mean sort of everyday creativity here, not sort of Van Gogh or something, but everyday creativity is problem solving, and we're better at problem solving when we're in a good mood.
Yes, yeah. So you've spent years measuring it. How do you measure happiness?
Very simply. I mean, I try for simplicity, and so that my favorite measure of happiness is to ask people every week, how happy were you at work this week?
Yeah.
Because it goes up and down. I mean, you can stretch that out to a month and people just about remember the last month. When you go beyond that, you go into their general vague feeling about what they're doing. You can go tighter than that. You could ask people about daily. The issue with daily is not the statistical nature of it, it's collecting the data. People get bored of answering. So the way that I always frame it with clients is to do it weekly or monthly. And what you must do is, I say, measure, meet, repeat. You measure, you've got to meet and talk about that data. You've got to get teams talking about that data. And then that's when you'll unlock the power of the measurement.
You just reminded me of somebody we've had on this show. I've interviewed separately as well. Simon Biltcliffe of, I can't think what his company's name is now, from Barnsley, and he had one of those. He had an iPad with like the smiley face, medium face, and sad face. You know, like getting toilets in the services. They had that in their company and had it published on their website, so people could see it in real time, which I was thought was really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it is, and in some ways that is the simplest measure, is a 3-point scale, which is unhappy, okay, happy. Some of the ones you see at airports have got 4 buttons, so 2 unhappy and 2 happy, and I think they make a mistake by not having the middle one, because okay is like a soft not okay, and so it's actually a really good thing to measure. And what I know is that people are quite energetic when they're happy. They're moving forward. They're quite energetic when they're unhappy. Actually, they're going to change something. The dead energetic spot is okay. So you can actually get stuck in okay because there's not any energy to move out of it. Yeah. So most of the organizations I work for, they're not dealing with sort of comedy parody of unhappy teams who are, sort of like a Dilbert cartoon or whatever. They're normally dealing with people just low energy.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? As you say, that when you think of a 3-point sort of scale, that the middle one ought to be sort of, well, that's fine. But as you say, it's actually, if you're not happy, then you're not happy. Whether you say you're okay or not happy, either of those two aren't being happy, are they?
Yeah, I mean, I always label my response codes: very unhappy, unhappy. I use a 5.1, okay, happy, very happy. The biggest unhappy and very unhappy are actually very similar. There's not much difference between them in the outcomes. The big difference is okay to happy. That's where the biggest plus is. Some people have some weeks when they're very happy, and then that's great, but they'll move back to a sort of set point of happy, and that's about right, because we need some striving. It's sort of, it would be dysfunctional to be very happy all the time. Slightly, I think people would be covering up things.
Yeah.
So you look for some variance in the data, and you're trying to make a tool. I'm trying to make a tool anyway that's not observing. It's actually an active tool in an organization that you can act on the data and deal with things that aren't working. So you want people to be honest.
Yes. Yeah. So what about those organizations where they do end up with a lot of people in that okay space? What's the impact of that?
Well, it is underperformance. And higher burnout and slightly higher staff turnover. Staff turnover, okay, is higher than happy, but it's much higher when they go into the unhappy space. Whereas sort of burnout and boredom is actually really corrosive. And it's actually one of the surprising things. One of the things that really surprised me in the happiness data when I first started to come across this, I see it in every data set now, but boredom is 4 times worse than stress for people's happiness, and it's 3 times worse for their performance.
Wow.
And so I do some bits of work sometimes in the NHS, and they use a lot of stress audits. So I said, why don't you do a boredom audit? And it sounds crazy, but actually that's where the biggest problem is, boredom.
Yeah, I mean, I can see that, because in some cases stress can in the short term, drive sort of good performance, or get people galvanized around something or whatever. So that obviously chronic and on lots of stress, something else is not good. But that has sort of nuance, doesn't it? Whereas, as you said, boredom is boredom. There's nothing positive about it, really, is there?
Yeah, I mean, I think about it statistically. So if I've got a measure of stress and boredom in a data set, then it's only when stress becomes, people say they're very stressed, that starts to really impact them. If they are stressed or mildly stressed, it's not. Whereas as soon as their work isn't, every step from totally bored to fully interested is a positive. Every step up there. Whereas the stress, it doesn't really kick in until very stressed. And then again, it has to be over a period of time, or no, it doesn't have to be. That is bad. But, if it's over a period of time, then that's a real problem.
Yes. Yeah. So what should organizations be doing to move people away from that okayness and into happiness more generally?
Yeah, there's no silver bullet. It's a lot of it. I mean, the main thing is about improving relationships. Relationships are the sort of foundation of happiness in our own lives and at work. And so building teams, building trust in teams, building happiness in teams takes time, and really it's attending to people's inner experience of their work. And I suggest every week, which is basically, measure on a Friday how was last week, ask people what went well in their week and try and build on that. Ask them what didn't go well, try and tackle that. So it's a sort of friction and flow in everyday work that I'm trying to mostly encourage organizations to. This culture, we can come back to culture in a minute, but the friction and flow, I think, is much under acknowledge what a big impact that is on both happiness and performance. People like to achieve things at work. They don't want to be held back. So get rid of their frustrations and build on what's going well. So the main thing is to get teams to meet every week and have a little chat about it. It doesn't take long, 10, 20 minutes a week.
Yeah. And it's funny, the thing you say about friction, so many times when you talk to people and they'll tell you about some really frustrating thing that happens at work, and it's sort of nothing to do with what they're supposed to be doing, but it gets completely in the way of what they're supposed to be doing. And it's almost like, I don't know, you're the statistician, so I won't say that I know, but it's like, I don't know, 5 times worse than anything, and it's just something so small. I mean, I had it today. I'm working with on an interim contract, and I can't log into my account on my laptop, so I can log in on my phone, I can log in on my iPad, so I can do some work, but I can't get to the internet, and I can't get to my actual documents because I don't access those through my mobile. So I can't actually do my work today, and I also don't know how to contact the help desk because that's via the internet that I can't access.
I mean, as you said, I write short chapters, and one of the chapters is called "Bad Systems Beat Good People." And I went to do a talk in Ireland. This must be about 2 or 3 years ago, and quite often I'll go and be the keynote on wellbeing or happiness, and there'll be some case studies locally, and they're all good, but there was this one from County, I think it was County Clare County Council, and this woman, she was quite nervous to speak, and she stood up and she talked about the IT system being a wellbeing intervention, and I thought, my God, someone's got it. Someone's got it. That actually the systems really, really matter. And she basically spoke about the fact that they put in tablets for all the people. So they've got people going out to housing estates to do sort of social assessments. They've got people doing road stuff. They're out in the field. They can enter all the data they need to whilst they're in the field. It saves them 30% of their time.
Yeah.
And they get on with doing their real job where they add the most value. Yes. And she framed it. It's the first time I've heard someone frame a case study as this was a wellbeing intervention, and she's absolutely right.
Yeah, and it's interesting you say that. I chaired a conference last week about strategic workforce planning in the age of AI. So very topical. But we had somebody there from a council who said that their social workers were using iPads out in the field, and how they actually have got their lives back because they don't have to work extra hours and they get to work with people more, which is what their job's supposed to be about. So
yeah,
he didn't describe it in those terms, but that was exactly what he was telling the room about. Any of you who are worrying about AI, in this case, we've got people who are actually seeing massive benefits in terms of, I guess, their happiness at work because of technology.
Absolutely. I mean, the great thing about County Clare was that they did it for that reason, and she also had another brilliant system where she set up the fairest, most detailed system for like whether you can work from home and how often you can work from home.
Yeah.
And they they're a county council, so they're spending public money, but she just did it so thoroughly. So it included someone going to visit people's home to see what their workstation would be at home. And if you think, I mean, I remember during COVID interviewing a young woman for a job, and she was in a cupboard under the stairs because it was the only place she could get any privacy in her, I don't know, sort of student house, where she could do something. And you just, for me, it's fine to work from home. I've got space, but for lots of people, it isn't. And she was just so thorough. And she said, the best thing is we've got 900 people. We've not had one complaint about our system.
Yeah.
And I think fairness and being systematic and being transparent, these are all happiness, these are all well-being, these are all engagement interventions.
Yes, yeah, definitely. And I do think in so many organizations, there are so many things that everyone knows are a problem and nobody ever deals with. And they are sometimes big things, but often they're really small things. And you just think, going back to weekly review of if
Mm.
people are happy. I guess one of the things would be how to surface that stuff, because if it's something that just keeps going and is always a problem, does it get forgotten about? You know, because it's always there. So this week we don't bother talking about it. I guess that's the skill of the manager asking the question.
Yeah, I mean, it is. So when I work with organizations, we put in a system called Friday Pulse, which is because we take the pulse every Friday. And including that are these notes, what's gone well, what's frustrating you. And they do stack up in the organization, and you can, analyze them and see what's coming through from every team. So it's about surfacing that frontline feedback and acting on it. But I design things for the team to use for themselves, but it does create data for people, in HR or senior leaders that they can see. So, but you've got to make it work for the teams themselves, because if teams just feel they're being sort of watched, things don't work. And that, particularly team leaders, like absolutely a team leader impacts the happiness of their team, but don't ask people how happy are you with your team leader, because the team leaders would just freeze. Ask them, serious things about the types of things that make for a good team culture, and then you'll see. And then they also give feedback to the team leader how to be better, rather than saying people don't like you.
Yes. Yeah. So you talk about 5 ways to happiness at work.
Yeah.
What are they? We haven't got time to go in lots of detail.
No. But the friction and flow is about people's sort of weekly work, and then there's the culture of the teams. And what I see in my data is that team culture is very impactful on people's happiness. So the organizational culture does, but the team culture will be 3 times more important. What does that mean? Lots of microcultures in organizations. There's good teams in difficult organizations. There's difficult teams in good organizations. There's a variance there. So, and what drives a good culture at a team level? Well, I call it 5 things. So connect, be fair, empower, challenge, inspire. So you're really talking about relationships, justice, autonomy, sort of development, and meaning. I frame them in very easy words: connect, be fair, empower, challenge, inspire. Not easy. In positive verbs that people can use, because then people can immediately see what they do. Whereas you say increase people's autonomy, what do they mean? So it's really just, as always, I'm trying to communicate in a way that actually helps people act.
And so that then leads to potential actions for leaders to take. We like to be quite practical on here, and David McLeod always talks about what can the manager do on Monday morning, in this case on Tuesday morning, having listened to it on Monday evening. So what sort of things can leaders be doing right now to improve their happiness at work?
So with or without measurement, I think you should be gathering your team together once a week, very least once a fortnight, and asking people, going around every team member and asking them what's gone well for them, what have they succeeded in. Start with that, because too often at work we go from one challenge to the next, and we just keep sort of stretching. We've got to just settle and go, oh, that's good, we've done that. It's like how sports coaches, people might be going for Olympic gold, quite good this week, but they break up their sports into small accomplishments. So give people a sense that they're progressing their work and that they're doing well. Build on those positives, and don't let people say nothing, even if it's tiny. Get that, because in there are people's strengths. And then the other thing I encourage people actually is to thank each other, is to just express gratitude for support, or shouting out someone for doing a good job. But thanking each other and technically in psychology it's called positivity resonance. You're basically spreading the love, but you're sharing that. So do those 2 things only when you've got that positivity in the team. Then ask people what's frustrating them and holding them back. You must do the positives first. If you start with the frustrations, you'll have a very different team meeting. Once you start with the positives, people will be energized, they feel good, and then they'll tackle the issues together. Although, sometimes it might be that they have a shared grumble about something, but that's shared, and then of course the team leader can push it up if they need to. But basically try and get those out in the open, because people will be sitting on them, they'll be festering on them, and then they sort of rot. So get them out. Try and do what you can do. So the biggest tip I can do that is just have a little team meeting every week. What's gone well, what hasn't, thank each other as well. That's the biggest tip.
And how much is it about them taking action themselves as a team, and how much about sort of taking it away? Because I think that can make a big difference.
Oh, I think you should. Happiness is a very local issue. It's very localized. And so, and I think also a mistake with lots of staff surveys is that they sit very high up the organization and then people feel they have to solve the problems. I think give the team leader, give the team, the whole team, the data. This is how we're feeling. What are we going to do about it? Because, I don't know what percentage, I'm guessing here, and I'm saying, and it's dangerous that a statistician puts a percentage on something they're guessing, but I would probably say 60 to 80% of the things they can sort themselves, and there's only a few things they need to escalate. So give them the stuff, let them get on with it. It's being autonomy supportive to the team is what you really want to do, and then let them go. And then if something gets stuck, I say there's a danger of getting stuck in okay is fine if you're not stuck in it. It's better than unhappy. And if you dip into okay and then you look at it and you come back, that is a perfectly natural process. The stuckness is when you're just consistently in it, and then that's when people need support, a nudge. What's going on? How can we help?
Yes. Yeah. I shared something on Facebook the other day that I've shared on a number of occasions. It pops up every so often, and I'm always rubbish at remembering quotes and things, but I've just gone back to get it so I get it right. And it says, if you don't like how things are, change it. You're not a tree.
Yeah. Well, even trees grow towards the light.
That's true.
But yeah, I mean, we can move. Yeah. And I mean, that's what I mean by unhappiness as a signal to change. And,
Yes.
and it's a biological signal. And so, and the issue with okay is that the signal's is often too weak.
Yeah.
So you almost need to amplify the signal. In fact, in lots of ways, that's what I'm doing my data by feeding it back. Is you're taking the data, you're feeding it back, you're getting people to attend to it. The things that people would avoid that you're putting in front of their nose. So you're amplifying the signal.
Yes. Yeah. So we just got a couple more minutes. So what do you want leaders most to take away from Happiness is a Serious Business, the book?
As it says in the title, that happy teams are more successful. I mean, a happy team is a successful team. That's a sort of simple truth, but remember it and actually understand that you can build happiness. It takes time, but it is those, James Clearly, Atomic Habits, he talks about habits are the compound interest. If you repeat them, if you do that sort of weekly habit, you attend to things, these things will get better. And they're relationship led, and helping team leaders who can often be nervous. Say, oh, I don't want to talk about my team's happiness. It's too stressful. I'm too busy. Well, they often are too busy. There's a lot of unpaid overtime in team leaders.
Yeah.
There's not much training for them in people skills. So yeah, I'd rather avoid it. Well, laissez-faire is actually not good in this area. Actually attending to it is better. Everyone knows how everyone's feeling. It's surfacing it helps improve it massively.
Yeah. And I think that the key thing for me is that you can do something about it. It's a sort of symptom, byproduct, whatever, of things that you do, but actually you can do things.
Yeah.
It's not that it's just it is or it isn't.
Which is
the whole point of the book.
Yeah, the whole point of the book is that, and I do cite other examples, though I do go into the measure, meet, repeat methodology because that's what I use and I know it works. And yeah, so the book is really what is happiness, why team happiness matters. There's some bits about people get wrong. That's where bad systems beat good people came from. And then there's how do you do it? Yeah, and you can do it.
Brilliant, lovely. Thank you, Nick. It's been great to get you back on the show again. A really interesting show today, and definitely recommend the book. And as I say, I have actually read it. Don't always read the books that we're talking about on here, but I have read this one definitely. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Jo.
And just to let you know, next week I'll be back talking to Maria Brink, who's founder and president of Synergy International. And we're talking about the leadership that got us here won't get us where we need to go.